おはようございます皆さん Today I'd like to watch Why Japanese People Don't Like Foreigners by Paolo from Tokyo. Well, for me, I like people from other countries, so I'm curious what Japanese people think about them in general. Okay, let's start it.
So have you guys ever wondered what Japanese people are really thinking? Well, in this video I wanted to share with you guys some of the things that they never tell you, but they're actually thinking inside of their head. So I've been in Japan for more than 15 years and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the stuff that I've learned all along the way.
In general, Japanese people like to follow the rules, so when others break those rules, it's very frustrating for them. On top of that,
true.
Japanese people don't like interacting with strangers, so they'll try to avoid speaking out at all costs.
Yeah, that's right. Like me, many Japanese people are shy and tend to avoid fighting or arguing with others, so we rarely advise or warn someone.
And the reason why I know this is because I've actually made a lot of these mistakes myself. When you do come to a different country, you want to be as respectful as possible, but it's just hard because a lot of the times Japanese don't tell you that you're pissing them off. But just keep in mind that I'm generalizing things. Not everyone is like this in Japan. These are some of the guidelines to help you guys understand what Japanese people are thinking, and so maybe you don't piss them off when you come to Japan.
Number 1, not wearing masks in public when you're sick.
If you ever come to Japan or have watched Japanese videos or any of my videos for that matter, you'll notice that a lot of people are wearing masks, getting on airplanes or sometimes they're just on the train. So what a lot of people think is that Japanese people are scared of getting sick, and so they wear the mask to protect themselves from other people transferring any viruses or any sicknesses to them. That's actually partly true, but the other side of it is they're trying to protect other people. When Japanese people get sick, they don't want to transfer what they've caught or their illness to someone else, so they wear a mask to protect other people. So what actually pisses them off is that when someone else is sick and they're not wearing a mask. As a common courtesy, Japanese people expect others when they're sick to wear a mask. So if you're ever in Japan and you do get sick, it would probably be good to wear a mask. Number 2.
Yeah, okay, stop. I think this video was made before the pandemic, but it is true that many Japanese people wore masks even before it. The reason for this is because to prevent dry skin and allergies in spring. Also, in Japan, there are many people who consider it as bad manners for women not to wear makeup, so many women wear masks to hide their non-makeup face. Therefore, most of Japanese people didn't have any resistance to wear masks. But what surprised me after the pandemic was that I saw on the news that there are a certain number of people in overseas who claim that they don't wear masks. That's when I first learned that it is a unique thing that Japanese people wear masks so much.
Number 2, squatting in public. If you ever been walking the streets in Japan, or especially Tokyo, you'll probably rarely see Japanese people squatting. The reason for this is when Japanese people see someone squatting, they actually think that this person is poorly brought up. And one thing that I kind of see personally in Tokyo, especially with tourists, is I'll go to a department store and I'll just see them like sitting against a pillar or sitting like actually on the ground in the department store, or maybe they're sitting on some stairs. This is actually the same thing as squatting in public. Japanese kind of view that as behaving poorly. So the thing is, in Japan, department stores are considered luxuries. So it's kind of weird for Japanese people to see someone squatting when they're trying to like get that luxury experience. It's kind of like seeing someone picking their nose right next to the Chanel shop or like the Gucci shop. So if you do feel tired, then definitely find a seat. I know Tokyo is a bit hard, especially because there's not a lot of places to sit. If you can, definitely try to find a seat, or what Japanese people will do is they'll find a cafe and they'll sit there. Number 3.
Yeah, he's right. As he said, in Japan, sitting on the ground is very much frowned upon as an undignified act. However, it is true that there are not so many benches in Japan and it's hard to find a place to sit. Also, it's hard to find a cafe, and even when we do find one, it's often too packed to get in. By the way, when I went abroad before, I was surprised to see so many benches on the roadside. I could enjoy the view of the city while sitting on them, and that's when I first realized that Japan is a country with very few benches. I was jealous of that.
Number 3, blocking traffic. Now this kind of goes hand in hand with like sitting in department stores or squatting in public. Basically, you're making a nuisance of yourself when you're blocking traffic. So for example, you'll be walking on the street, you'll just see like a group of tourists just standing in the walkway and not letting people pass by. That just like really pisses people off because a lot of people are trying to get from A to B and you're just like getting in their way and you're not kind of considering others. Not to say that all foreigners or tourists do this, but Japanese people do it too. But as you get kind of older, you realize to be more courteous of others and you try not to get in other people's way. So if possible, if you need to stop, don't stop in traffic. Try to go off to the side where you're not actually getting in people's way. Number 4, expecting places like food stalls to accept credit cards. And now I've gone over this so many times in my other videos that Japan is still very much a cash-based society. If you're buying street food, probably not expect them to accept a credit card because it's just kind of common sense, common knowledge that these places don't accept credit card and they will get kind of like annoyed. It's kind of like, why are you asking me to take credit card when you know this place, these shops don't take credit cards? Because at the end of the day, it just makes you look like you don't have any common sense.
Okay, let's stop. This is simply because many stores don't accept credit cards, so I don't think they don't like you. Especially I think it's rare to find shopkeepers who think you don't have common sense, so don't worry about that. So for this section, rather than saying that you shouldn't use credit card because shopkeepers won't like you, it's better to remember that many stores in Japan only accept cash. So it's one of the things that you should keep in mind when you come to Japan.
Alright, so it just started to rain, so I needed to find some cover, and what better way to do it than here. Let's continue on. Number 5, eating at tourist trap spots. Now this one, again, maybe doesn't piss Japanese off per se. It is kind of embarrassing to go and eat at these kind of places because it's just so much food that Japan has to offer. When foreigners go to these like very tourist trap places and eat, it's kind of like, oh, you kind of missed out. Thing is, I've actually gone to a lot of these like tourist trap places myself, just not knowing better, and I kind of wanted to give you some pointers on what's a tourist trap spot and what is not. This usually applies to, for example, like izakayas, Japanese drinking restaurants. So the ideal for a good Japanese restaurant would be a place like this that keeps it simple with minimal signage. What you'll find instead with like a lot of tourist trap places is not only will they have their sign, it may be in English, but they'll also have a signboard with pictures, not only Japanese, but it also has English on the menu. You're kind of like, oh, so they are like catering to a foreign market. One of the biggest giveaways for this is not only do you see English, but you see like Chinese and Korean. You see like 3 different languages on the menu. You might want to step back a little bit because this could be a tourist trap spot. Oh, one thing though, this kind of goes against what I was saying. Like for example, if you go to ramen shops, nowadays there's ramen shops, they get really popular and they have a lot of foreigners coming to it. Just to make the experience a little bit easier for both parties, they've just added the English to the menu, but originally they didn't have it. So it's not like they were like, initially trying to like get foreigners to come, it's just foreigners started coming, so they had to kind of adapt and add an English menu. Oh, and this is probably the biggest giveaway out of all of it. If you ever hear one of those like aggressive shamisen music playing in the front of the store, you should probably leave because they're like trying to attract tourists like you would not believe. But at the end of the day, if you want to come to Japan and you just feel comfortable eating at these like tourist trap spots, then yeah, that's fine. But if you want to come to Japan and you want to kind of experience like authentic Japanese cuisine, I would say just like try to stay away from these places. Alright, so before I continue...
Yeah, that's so true. Even from a Japanese perspective, I think Paolo's criteria for choosing a restaurant is not wrong. He really nailed it. So, to explain how we Japanese people choose restaurants, we often use a website called Tabelog. This website is very convenient because there are many restaurants listed on it, and more importantly, the rating system is very useful for choosing restaurants. And if you choose a restaurant with a rating of 3.5 or higher, you'll be fine. So you should definitely try it out.
Number 6, eating with your offhand underneath the table. So this one was like really weird to me because one, I didn't know this until after coming to Japan, and in fact, to be honest with you, I still do it sometimes. The way you're supposed to eat in Japan is you're supposed to just have dominant hand, you're eating with your chopsticks, and you maybe have your rice bowl on the other hand, and you're just like you're just like eating like this. But sometimes if you don't have the bowl in your hand and you're just eating on the table, like I sometimes take my offhand and I put it underneath the table or like just on my lap and I eat with just one hand.
Okay.
But apparently this is just kind of bad manners in Japan. This is something that Japanese kids grow up with their parents like telling them to always show their other hand, because I think just in general people like to put their offhand underneath the table or on their lap when they eat. I don't know if this is a thing in your country, but it definitely is something here in Japan. So when you eat and you want to have kind of good manners, then you should leave or you should show your offhand the entire time, just like put it on the table. And finally, before we get out of this
let's stop. I'm not so sure about this one. I don't think we Japanese force foreigners to behave this way, and for me, I don't feel particularly uncomfortable about it. What you should be more careful than this one is the use of chopsticks. Especially, you should never stick chopsticks into the bowl or handing food to someone with chopsticks. The first one is only allowed to place food offering next to the head of deceased during funeral. And the second one is for picking up a bone of the deceased during cremation. So those are considered as particularly bad thing to do it while eating in Japan. Therefore, I think you would rather remember this one.
And finally, before we get out of this place, number 7, not cleaning up after you eat. So cleanliness is kind of one of those pet peeves that Japanese people have. They like to keep everything clean, in general. So when you're eating in a public place, it's always like kind of proper manner just to clean up after yourself while you're eating, and especially after you eat. Maybe in other countries you expect the waiter or the waitress to clean up after you're eating, so you can like leave all of your crumbs on the table, you can leave your french fries or your noodles, it's just like spilled on the table. It's okay just to leave the table like that. But in fact, in Japan, it's like common courtesy to actually gather all of the napkins, all of like the loose items, and put it all in the bowl or in the center of the plate. And then if there's any like spots on the table, just to like wipe it down with a napkin, make it kind of tidy, because in Japan no one wants to have like a really messy table even after they leave. Is that an international thing, or is that just a Japanese thing? All right, so that's enough about food. Let's move on to the next spot. Number 8.
Let's stop. I've often heard that Japanese girls care a lot whether or not their boyfriends are cleaning the table when they are eating or after they finish eating. So if you want to make Japanese girlfriend, you might want to check this one out. Incidentally, as a Japanese man, I would feel a little uncomfortable if I was on a date with a woman who doesn't clean her table while she's eating or after she finished eating. I wouldn't hate her for it, but I would be a little surprised. Probably most of Japanese men concerned about this thing.
Number 8, making people wait. This one actually pisses a lot of Japanese off. So in general, I think Japanese people are very punctual, and that's just because they're being considerate of others. They don't want to make other people wait. So when they're supposed to meet someone, say for example for work, then they'll usually arrive 5 to 10 minutes early on site. They'll probably like go up a minute or two before going to the front desk and checking themselves in. It's just like it's one of those things. Being considerate is probably on the priority in like thinking of others. So the fact that you're late, meaning you're wasting other people's time, and Japanese people don't like to waste time, and in fact they hate it when someone else wastes their time. In fact, I've been here so long, it kind of pisses me off, to be honest, when people that I have a meeting with are late. I'll actually set up a lot of international calls, like on Skype or whatever. People overseas are always like 5, 10, 15 minutes later. They're emailing me just before, sorry, you got stuck in a different meeting. And I think it's almost like common practice to be late when you're setting up a meeting. But me being in Japan and working in a Japanese style environment for so many years, I've just got accustomed to being on time, or if not early, to all of my meetings. So if you ever come to Japan and you're meeting up with a Japanese friend, you have dinner reservations, or you're just meeting someone for business or for pleasure, you want to be on time, if not early. So definitely keep that in mind when setting up your meetings. But there is one caveat to this. So as people get more comfortable with each other, then I wouldn't say it's accepted to be late, but it's more forgiven, and it's not as big of a thing when compared to if you were acquaintances or if it were a business meeting. At the end of the day, it's just being considerate, and sometimes I don't understand why that's so hard for some people. Maybe it pisses me off with Japanese people. Number 9, talking to someone.
I really understand that. It's true that Japanese people can be very punctual. However, Japanese people are very strict when it comes to time about starting something, but very loose when it comes to time about finishing work or meetings. People are always slacking off in the meeting or working even after the designated time has passed. If I try to go home on time, my boss will often give me a very unpleasant look. I'm really sick of this custom.
Number 9, talking to someone in line. So again, this one is another thing that kind of surprised me. Kind of one of those reverse culture shocks when I went in the States. I was just waiting in line at the supermarket and all of a sudden someone behind me just started talking to me, asking me about the weather or the sports team or something like that. And I was completely shocked. I think it's because I've been in Tokyo so long that people here in Tokyo, at least, they don't appreciate it when a random person just approaches them, especially if they're just doing their normal daily tasks, like going to the convenience store to buy something. It catches a lot of people off guard and it kind of just makes people uncomfortable. I know there's people out there that like to talk to people, but if you want to kind of respect people's boundaries and their spaces, then you might not want to just like come up and start talking to them. So I think the exception to this is if you do have a reason to talk to someone. So for example, you are lost and you need like directions, then you can like say sumimasen, excuse me, and then ask for directions. I think this is probably more mainly to do with the city because there's just so many people, there's so many like interactions that could potentially happen that you don't want to like continue to get bombarded with people. So people are kind of in their own zone. In the city, maybe if you were to go out in the countryside, it's less likely. People have their guard down more so. In fact, they may actually appreciate you talking to them. Don't take this as like all of Japan is like this, but maybe like in the city areas where people are just more closed off, then you might make them feel uncomfortable. And finally, number 10.
It's true that most of Japanese people rarely talk to strangers. But if you want to talk to Japanese people, I suggest you go to a place where you can drink. Japanese people are usually shy, but when we start drinking, many of us become more cheerful and aggressive. So I'm pretty sure everyone will be very friendly and talkative.
And finally, number 10, talking way too loud.
Way too loud.
I see this all the time.
I
when
don't
you're
like
on the
it
train,
either.
When you're on the bus, you're in a restaurant, and people are just talking so loud that it interrupts your thoughts. It's kind of off-putting, and it actually pisses a lot of Japanese off. I've heard my Japanese friends comment about it. It's just something that people kind of like get really turned off by because people do like their personal space, and someone like a group of people are talking way too loud, kind of just being inconsiderate about their surroundings. Then it just kind of like pisses people off. It just says that you don't really care about the other people around you. And I mean, if you're just like talking normal, it's not a big deal. But I will say that it's not like I don't hear Japanese people do this. I mean, like you'll probably sometimes be on a late train and people are like talking loudly because everyone's drunk on the train, or you'll go to maybe like a festival and people are talking loud. But just like in normal everyday daytime scenarios, people like try to keep their voice down so they don't bother other people. So if you are walking around and you don't want to piss people off, then just like keep your volume to, as my grammar school teacher used to say, keep your 12-inch voices. Maybe
12-inch voices.
1 yard voice, because I was in the States. So yeah, those are my...
Let's stop. This is definitely true. And on a related note, calling someone on the train or bus is also considered as bad manners, so don't do it. This video is very informative for people who are coming to Japan for the first time. As long as you keep manners to a minimum, you won't have any problem at all. So I think it's best not to be too nervous about it and just enjoy Japan. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. See you soon.